The moment Willa Whitmore realized the blizzard would kill her if she stayed on the trail. She could barely see 3 feet ahead through the swirling white chaos that had transformed the New Mexico high country into a frozen hell. She had been riding from Santa Fe to deliver urgent medical supplies to the mining camp at Red River, a journey that should have taken 2 days in late November of 1883. But the weather had turned with a vengeance that caught even the old-timers by surprise. Her horse stumbled again, and Willa knew with grim certainty that if she did not find shelter within the hour, neither of them would see another sunrise. The wind screamed through the ponderosa pines like a living thing, and snow pelted her face with stinging fury. Her fingers had gone numb inside her leather gloves an hour ago, and her wool coat, though well made, was never designed for weather this brutal. She had grown up in Pinon, a small town nestled in the foothills where her father ran the general store, and she knew these mountains well enough to recognize when nature had turned murderous. The temperature had plummeted at least 30 degrees since morning, and the snow that had started as gentle flakes now fell in thick, suffocating sheets. Through the white curtain, she caught a glimpse of something dark and angular, a structure. Her heart leaped with desperate hope as she urged her exhausted mare forward, squinting against the wind. Yes, there it was, a line shack, one of the small cabins that ranchers maintained throughout the high grazing lands for cowboys tending cattle in remote areas. This one belonged to the Ashford ranch, she thought, though in the disorienting storm she could not be entirely certain of her location. Willa half fell from her saddle, her legs nearly buckling when her boots hit the snow-covered ground. She grabbed her saddlebags and the precious bundle of medical supplies, then led her horse around the side of the cabin where a small lean-to provided minimal shelter. Her fingers fumbled with the knots of her bedroll, and she managed to pull it free, draping it over the shivering animal. It was not much, but it might keep the mare alive until the storm passed. The cabin door was latched but not locked. Thank God, line shacks were left open deliberately for emergencies exactly like this. Willa shoved it open and stumbled inside, dragging her bags with her. The interior was dark and bitterly cold, but it was shelter from the wind, and that alone felt like salvation. She dropped her bags and leaned against the closed door, her breath coming in ragged gasps that created clouds of vapor in the freezing air. As her eyes adjusted to the dimness, she could make out the sparse furnishings. A small iron stove sat in one corner, a narrow bunk against the wall, a rough-hewn table with 2 chairs, and shelves holding supplies. Firewood was stacked beside the stove, and Willa could have wept with relief. She shed her snow-crusted coat and went immediately to work, her survival instincts overriding her exhaustion. The kindling box yielded dry tinder and small sticks. Matches. She needed matches. Her hands shook as she searched the shelves, finding a tin that rattled with promise. Inside were matches, and she carefully struck one, cupping the flame as she transferred it to the stove. The kindling caught, and she fed it gradually, nursing the small flame until it was strong enough for larger pieces of wood. While the fire built, Willa explored her temporary sanctuary. The shelves held canned beans, coffee, flour, salt pork, and other staples. There was a bucket for water, though she would have to melt snow. A lantern hung from a hook, and she lit it, filling the cabin with warm light that made the space feel infinitely more hospitable. The bunk had a thin mattress and 2 wool blankets, dusty but intact. By the time full darkness fell outside, Willa had transformed the cabin into a haven. The stove radiated blessed heat, and she had positioned herself as close to it as she dared, slowly thawing her frozen extremities. The pain as feeling returned to her fingers and toes was excruciating, but she welcomed it as proof she had avoided frostbite. She melted snow for water, made weak coffee, and heated a can of beans for supper. It was a meager meal, but it was hot, and that was all that mattered. The storm howled outside with unabated fury. Through the single small window, she could see nothing but darkness and wind-driven snow. Willa checked on her horse once, forcing herself back into the brutal weather just long enough to bring the mare a bucket of water and an armful of hay she found stored in the lean-to. The animal was still standing, which was a good sign, though it looked as miserable as Willa felt. That night, she curled beneath the blankets on the narrow bunk, feeding the stove every few hours to keep the fire alive. Sleep came in fits and starts, interrupted by the shrieking wind and the occasional groan of the cabin's timbers. She thought about her father, who would be frantic with worry when she did not arrive in Red River on schedule. She thought about the miners who needed those medical supplies, 2 men with pneumonia and another who had suffered a badly broken leg. She thought about how close she had come to dying on that mountain trail. The next morning brought no relief. If anything, the storm had intensified. Snow had drifted against the cabin door, and Willa had to shoulder it open with considerable effort. The world outside was a whiteout, visibility reduced to mere inches. The temperature seemed to have dropped even further, and the wind had a razor edge that cut through her clothing in seconds. She saw to her horse as quickly as possible, then retreated back inside, accepting the reality that she was trapped here until the weather broke. The second day passed with agonizing slowness. Willa rationed the firewood carefully, knowing she might need to make it last for days. She melted more snow, drank coffee, and ate sparingly from the cabin's supplies. She found a tattered copy of a 6-month-old newspaper and read every word, including the advertisements, simply to occupy her mind. She paced the small space, did exercises to keep her blood flowing, and tried not to think about what would happen if the storm continued for a week or more. On the 3rd day, the wind finally began to diminish, though snow continued to fall. Willa was checking the firewood supply and growing concerned about how quickly the pile was dwindling when she heard a sound that made her freeze. Voices. Men's voices, barely audible over the wind, coming from somewhere outside. Her first instinct was relief. Her second was caution. The high country could harbor dangerous men as easily as helpful ones, and a woman alone was vulnerable in ways that made her heart race with fear as much as hope. She moved to the window, peering out through the frost-covered glass. Through the falling snow, she saw a figure leading a horse toward the cabin, then another figure behind him. Both were so covered in snow they looked like frozen apparitions. The first man was tall and broad-shouldered, moving with the confident stride of someone accustomed to harsh conditions. He wore a heavy coat and a hat pulled low, a bandana covering the lower half of his face. Willa's hand went to the rifle she had found on the cabin wall, checking that it was loaded. She positioned herself away from the door, the weapon held ready but not aimed, trying to project readiness without outright hostility. The door burst open with a gust of wind and snow, and the first man stumbled inside, dragging his horse's reins. He stopped short when he saw her, his eyes widening above the bandana. For a long moment they stared at each other while snow blew in through the open door. "Madam," he said, his voice rough and surprised, "did not expect to find anyone here." The second figure appeared in the doorway, smaller than the first, and Willa realized with a start that it was not a second man but another horse, its head pushing into the cabin seeking warmth. "Shut the door," Willa said, finding her voice. "You are letting the heat out." The man seemed to shake himself from his surprise and quickly moved to close the door, leaving both horses outside. He pulled the bandana down, revealing a face that was weathered and handsome in the way of men who spent their lives outdoors. He looked to be in his mid-20s, with dark hair visible beneath his hat and eyes the color of smoke. His face was red from cold exposure, and ice clung to his beard. "Name is Sam Ashford," he said. "This is my family's line shack. I was checking on our cattle when the storm hit. Been riding for 2 days trying to reach shelter." Willa lowered the rifle slightly. "Willa Whitmore. I was heading to Red River when the weather turned. I hope you do not mind that I let myself in and used your supplies." "Mind?" Sam let out a short laugh. "You did the smart thing. This storm would have killed you if you had not found shelter." He shrugged out of his coat, shaking off the accumulated snow. "I need to see to the horses. There is room in the lean-to for mine with yours." "There should be," Willa said. "I will help." "No need, madam. Stay by the fire." "I will only be a few minutes." But Willa set the rifle aside and reached for her coat. "I said I will help. My horse has been out there for 3 days. I want to check on her." Something that might have been respect flickered in Sam's eyes. He nodded, and together they went back out into the brutal cold. Working side by side, they settled his 2 horses in the lean-to alongside Willa's mare, ensuring all 3 animals had hay and water. Sam produced oats from his saddlebags, rationing them carefully among the horses. His movements were efficient and practiced, the actions of a man who had done this work countless times. Back inside the cabin, with the door firmly shut and the stove stoked with fresh wood, they stood awkwardly for a moment. The space that had felt adequate for 1 person suddenly seemed cramped with 2. Willa was acutely aware that she was alone with a strange man, miles from anywhere, trapped by the storm. Sam seemed to sense her discomfort because he moved to the far side of the room, giving her space. "I will sleep on the floor," he said. "You keep the bunk. And you do not need to worry about me, Miss Whitmore. My mother raised me to be a gentleman, and I have 3 sisters who would skin me alive if I behaved otherwise." Something about the way he said it, matter of fact and sincere, eased the knot of tension in Willa's chest. "I appreciate that, Mr. Ashford, and please call me Willa. Formality seems a bit silly when we are sharing a cabin no bigger than a horse stall." "Sam, then," he said and smiled. It was a good smile, warm and genuine, transforming his weathered face into something more approachable. "I am going to make coffee. Real coffee, not the weak stuff. You look like you could use some." Over the next hours, as the storm continued to rage outside, Willa and Sam fell into an easy rhythm. He proved to be a skilled cook, managing to create a decent stew from the cabin's limited supplies. She contributed a small amount of the dried venison she had been carrying in her saddlebags. They ate together at the small table, and conversation flowed more naturally than Willa would have expected. She learned that Sam was 25, the youngest of 4 siblings, and that he had spent his entire life working the Ashford ranch. His father had died 2 years earlier, and now Sam and his older brother ran the operation together, running cattle across thousands of acres of high country grazing land. He was patient and thoughtful in his speech, choosing words carefully, and he had a dry sense of humor that caught Willa off guard and made her laugh despite their circumstances. Sam learned that Willa was 22, that she had grown up in Pinyon helping her father in the general store, and that she had recently begun making supply runs to the remote mining camps because she knew the mountain trails better than most men and had a head for business. She told him about the medical emergency in Red River, the worry she felt about the men who were waiting for supplies that might now arrive too late. "The storm cannot last much longer," Sam said. "Another day, maybe 2, and it will blow itself out. Red River is not that far from here if the weather clears. I know the trails. I will guide you there when it is safe to travel." "You do not need to do that," Willa said. "You must have your own work waiting." "The cattle will keep," Sam said. "They know how to hunker down in weather like this, find shelter in the draws and tree cover. Anyway, my brother will have checked on them from the other line shacks. You should not ride alone after a storm like this. The trails will be dangerous, with drifts and the risk of more weather moving in." Willa wanted to argue, to insist on her independence, but the practical part of her knew he was right. The high country after a major storm was treacherous, and having someone who knew the land intimately would significantly improve her chances of reaching Red River safely. "Thank you," she said instead. "I accept your offer." As night fell again, they settled into their respective sleeping spots. Sam made a bedroll on the floor near the stove, insisting he was comfortable there and that he had slept in far worse conditions during roundups and trail drives. Willa took the bunk, but sleep eluded her for a long time. She was aware of Sam's breathing, the occasional crackle of the fire, the endless moan of wind outside. She was aware, too, of a feeling she could not quite name, something that had sparked to life when Sam smiled at her across the table. The fourth day of the storm brought a subtle shift. The wind lost some of its fury, and though snow still fell, it was lighter, less relentless. Sam went out periodically to check on the horses and to assess conditions. Each time he returned, he reported incremental improvements. By afternoon, the snow had stopped entirely, though the sky remained heavy and gray. "Tomorrow morning," Sam said. "If the weather holds, we can try for Red River. It will be hard going through the drifts, but the horses are rested and fed. We should make it by afternoon." That evening felt different from the previous nights. There was an anticipation in the air, a sense of their time together in this small cabin coming to an end. They made another simple meal, but the conversation was more subdued, both of them perhaps recognizing that something had developed here in this isolated space, something neither of them knew quite how to name or acknowledge. "Can I ask you something?" Sam said as they cleaned up after supper. "Why do you make these supply runs yourself? It seems like dangerous work for a woman traveling alone." Willa bristled slightly at the implication. "I am as capable as any man of riding these trails, more capable than most, actually. I grew up in these mountains." "I did not mean to offend," Sam said quickly. "I am sure you are very capable. I have seen that for myself these past few days. I just wondered why you choose this work when it puts you in situations like this storm." Willa was quiet for a moment, considering her answer. "My mother died when I was 16, she finally said. "A fever that came on sudden and took her in 3 days. The doctor from Santa Fe arrived 2 days after she passed. He said if he had gotten there sooner, if he had been able to treat her earlier, she might have lived. I swore then that I would never let distance and difficulty prevent someone from getting help if I could do something about it. So when the mining camps send word they need medical supplies or medicine, I make sure it gets there, fast as I can manage." Sam's expression softened. "That is a good reason, an admirable one. I am sorry about your mother." "It was 6 years ago," Willa said. "The pain dulls, but it does not disappear, and it gave me a purpose. I suppose that is something." "It is more than something," Sam said. "It is everything. Purpose is what gets us through the hard times." They fell silent again, but it was a comfortable silence, the kind that exists between people who have begun to understand each other. Outside, the night was clear for the first time in days, and through the cabin window, stars were visible, brilliant and cold against the black sky. "Storm has broken," Sam observed. "We will have good weather for traveling tomorrow." Willa should have felt relief, but instead she felt an odd pang of something like regret. Their time in this cabin, strange and unexpected as it had been, was ending. Tomorrow they would ride to Red River, she would deliver her supplies, and then what? They would part ways, return to their separate lives. Sam would go back to ranching, and she would return to Pinyon and continue her supply runs. The thought left her feeling hollow in a way she did not want to examine too closely. That night, lying on the narrow bunk while Sam breathed steadily from his spot near the stove, Willa found herself thinking about the past 4 days in a new light. She had been so focused on survival, on staying warm and fed and safe, that she had not fully registered what else had been happening. But now, in the quiet darkness, she could not deny it. She had enjoyed Sam's company, more than enjoyed it. She had felt something stir in her chest when he smiled, had found herself watching him when he was not looking, had liked the sound of his voice and the way he moved, and the easy confidence he brought to even simple tasks. This was dangerous territory. Willa had never had much time or inclination for romance. Her life in Pinyon was busy and full. Her supply runs occupied much of her energy, and the few men who had shown interest in courting her had seemed pale and insubstantial, offering nothing she wanted. She had begun to think she might be one of those women who simply never married, and she had made peace with that possibility. But now, lying in the dark listening to a cowboy breathe, she found herself wondering if perhaps she had just never met the right person. Morning came with brilliant sunshine that reflected off the snow with blinding intensity. Sam was already up and moving when Willa woke, and he had coffee ready and breakfast cooking. They ate quickly, both eager to be on the trail now that weather permitted. The work of preparing for departure filled the next hour, packing saddlebags, checking equipment, ensuring the horses were sound for hard travel through deep snow. The world outside the cabin was transformed, buried under feet of fresh powder that sparkled like diamonds in the morning light. The temperature had risen enough to make travel feasible, but was still well below freezing. Sam took the lead, his horse breaking trail, and Willa followed, leading her mare carefully through the deep drifts. It was exhausting work for the animals, but Sam chose his route with practiced skill, finding the easiest path through the difficult terrain. They rode in silence for the first hours, concentrating on the demands of the trail. But as the morning wore on and they dropped down from the highest elevations, the going became somewhat easier. Sam began pointing out landmarks, telling Willa stories about the country they were passing through, and she found herself relaxing into the journey despite its challenges. "That ridge there," Sam said, gesturing to the north. "That is where my father proposed to my mother. He said he wanted to ask her at the highest, most beautiful place he knew, so she would understand how he felt about her. She said yes, even though it took them 4 hours to ride back down to the ranch and she about froze to death in the process." Willa laughed. "That sounds romantic and impractical in equal measure." "That was my father," Sam said, and his voice was warm with affection. "He was a dreamer. My mother was the practical one who made sure we all survived his romantic notions. They balanced each other well." "You miss him," Willa observed. "Every day," Sam admitted. "But I am grateful for the time we had. He taught me everything worth knowing about this land and about being a man. I try to live in a way that would make him proud." They rode on, and Willa found herself sharing more about her own life, her childhood in Pinyon, her close relationship with her father, her dreams of perhaps one day opening a proper mercantile of her own in one of the growing towns along the railroad. Sam listened with genuine interest, asking questions that showed he was truly paying attention, and Willa realized how rare that was, how few people actually listened rather than just waiting for their turn to speak. By early afternoon, They could see Red River in the distance, smoke rising from chimneys, the cluster of buildings that marked the mining camp's location. Willa felt a mix of relief and disappointment. Relief that she would finally deliver the medical supplies that had been delayed by the storm. Disappointment that her time with Sam was almost over. The camp was abuzz with activity when they rode in. Someone must have spotted their approach because a small crowd had gathered, and Willa recognized the camp doctor, Harold Peterson, hurrying toward them. "Miss Whitmore. Thank God you are safe. We heard about the storm and feared the worst." Dr. Peterson was a short, energetic man in his 50s, and his obvious relief was touching. "I found shelter at a lined shack," Willa said, dismounting and reaching for her saddlebags. "The supplies are all here." "How are your patients?" "Holding on, but barely," Dr. Peterson said. "You have arrived just in time. Come, we must get these medications prepared immediately." In the flurry of activity that followed, Willa lost track of Sam. She spent the next 2 hours with Dr. Peterson, helping him prepare and administer the medications she had brought, checking on the 3 men who had been the reason for her urgent journey. The 2 with pneumonia were in rough shape, but the doctor was optimistic that with proper treatment they would recover. The man with the broken leg had developed a fever, which was concerning, but again, the supplies Willa had brought would help. When she finally emerged from the doctor's quarters, the sun was already sinking toward the western horizon. She looked around the camp, searching for Sam, and felt a spike of panic when she did not immediately see him. Had he already left? Had he just dropped her off and continued on to his ranch without even saying goodbye? But then she spotted him near the camp's small stable, tending to the horses. Her relief was so profound it surprised her. She walked over, her boots crunching in the snow. "There you are," Sam said when he saw her. "I was starting to think the doctor had recruited you as his assistant permanent-like." "He certainly tried," Willa said with a small smile. "But I explained I have other responsibilities. The men are going to be all right, thanks to these supplies reaching them." If I had been even a day later, Dr. Peterson said the outcome might have been very different. "Then it is a good thing you started when you did," Sam said. "And it is a good thing that storm forced you to take shelter. Trying to push through would have killed you and your horse both, and then nobody would have gotten those supplies." "I suppose that is one way to look at it," Willa said. She hesitated, then forged ahead. "When do you plan to head back to your ranch?" "I was thinking I would stay in camp tonight," Sam said. "Get a hot meal at the boarding house, maybe a real bed for one night before the ride home. The horses could use the rest too, and there is no point in starting out this late in the day." "That seems sensible," Willa said, and then she took a breath. "I was thinking the same thing. Perhaps we could have that meal together. You have been kind to me these past days, Sam Ashford. I would like to repay some of that kindness with a proper dinner." Sam's face brightened. "I would like that very much, Willa Whitmore. There is not much in the way of fine dining in Red River, but the boarding house serves decent beef stew, and their biscuits are renowned throughout the territory." They had dinner together that evening in the boarding house's small dining room, which was crowded with miners and camp workers. The food was hearty and hot, and the conversation flowed as easily as it had in the lined shack. But there was a new awareness between them now, an acknowledgement that whatever had begun in that small cabin was something neither of them wanted to end. Over apple pie and coffee, Sam cleared his throat. "Willa, I know we have only known each other a few days, but I find myself not wanting to say goodbye to you. Would it be too forward of me to ask if I might write to you, if I might visit you in Pinyon when work allows?" Willa's heart was suddenly beating very fast. "It would not be too forward at all. In fact, I would like that very much. I would be disappointed if you did not ask." The smile that broke across Sam's face was like sunrise. "Then that is settled. I will write you within the week, and I will come to Pinyon as soon as I can manage. Fair warning, I am not much of a letter writer, but I will do my best." "I will look forward to whatever you write," Willa said, and she meant it with an intensity that surprised her. They parted that evening outside the boarding house, going to their separate rooms, but Willa lay awake long into the night thinking about what had happened. In the space of 4 days, trapped by a blizzard in a tiny line shack, she had met someone who had somehow slipped past all her defenses and made her feel things she had not known she was capable of feeling. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. The next morning they said their goodbyes in the cold dawn light. Sam was heading northwest to his family ranch, and Willa was riding south back to Pinyon. They stood beside their horses, breath fogging in the frigid air, neither quite ready to let go. "Travel safe," Sam said. "And be careful on those mountain trails. I know you are capable, but promise me you will be careful anyway." "I promise," Willa said. "You do the same, and keep the fire burning in that line shack. You never know when someone might need it again." "I will," Sam said. Then, with a boldness that seemed to surprise them both, he leaned down and pressed a brief, soft kiss to her cheek. "Until I see you again, Willa Whitmore." "Until then, Sam Ashford," Willa replied, her cheek burning where his lips had touched. She rode south with her heart full of something bright and hopeful, something she had not expected to find in the middle of a deadly blizzard. The ride back to Pinyon took 2 days, and Willa spent most of that time thinking about Sam. She replayed their conversations, remembered the way he had moved around the cabin with quiet competence, recalled how safe she had felt with him despite being trapped in an isolated place with a stranger. By the time she rode into Pinyon on a cold afternoon, she had admitted to herself that what she felt was not just attraction or passing fancy. It was deeper than that, more substantial, and it both excited and frightened her. Her father was overjoyed to see her, having spent the past week worrying himself sick over her safety. Willa reassured him, told him about finding the line shack and waiting out the storm, though she found herself being somewhat vague about Sam's arrival and their time together. It was too new, too precious, and she wanted to keep it private for a while longer. Life in Pinyon resumed its normal rhythm. Willa worked in the general store, helped her father with inventory and orders, and began planning her next supply run. But everything felt different now, colored by the anticipation of Sam's promised letter. She found herself watching for the mail coach with an eagerness she had never felt before, and each day that passed without word from him brought a small stab of anxiety. What if he had changed his mind? What if their time together had meant less to him than it had to her? But then, 10 days after she returned home, a letter arrived. Her father handed it to her with a knowing look that suggested he understood more than she had told him. Willa took it to her room and opened it with trembling hands. Sam's handwriting was neat but utilitarian, and his words were simple and direct. He told her about his journey home, about finding his brother and the rest of the ranch crew safe despite the storm. He told her about the cattle, about the work of winter feeding and checking on the herd. And then, in the last paragraph, he wrote something that made Willa's breath catch. "I cannot stop thinking about those days in the line shack. I know it was just a few days, and I know it might seem foolish to put so much weight on such a short time, but I have never felt with anyone else what I felt with you. I would very much like to know you better, Willa. I would like to see where this might lead if you are willing. I will be in Pinyon in 2 weeks' time, around the middle of December. I hope you will allow me to call on you proper-like." Willa read the letter 3 times, and each time her smile grew wider. She wrote back that same evening, telling Sam that yes, She would very much like him to call on her, and that she too had been thinking constantly about their time together. She told him about her work in the store, about Pinion, and what he could expect when he visited. And at the end, she wrote something bold that she might not have had the courage to say in person. "I am not given to fancy or romantic notions, Sam Ashford. I have always been practical and level-headed. But something happened in that line shack, something I cannot fully explain or dismiss. I felt a connection with you that I have never felt with anyone else. I want to see where that connection leads, wherever it might take us." The 2 weeks until Sam's visit passed with agonizing slowness. Willa found herself constantly distracted, making mistakes in the store's ledgers, losing track of conversations, daydreaming when she should have been working. Her father finally sat her down one evening and asked her directly what was going on. Willa told him everything. About Sam, about the line shack, about the letters and the visit. Her father listened quietly, and when she finished, he was silent for a long moment. "You care for him," he finally said. "It was not a question." "I do," Willa admitted. "I know it is fast, and I know it might seem impulsive, but Papa, I really do care for him. He is good and kind and capable, and when I am with him, I feel like the best version of myself." Her father reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Your mother and I knew each other for 2 weeks before I asked her to marry me. Everyone said we were crazy, that it was too fast, that it would never last. We were married for 23 years, and every one of them was a gift. Sometimes, Willa, you just know. If this Sam makes you feel the way you describe, then I look forward to meeting him." When Sam finally arrived in Pinion, riding into town on a cold December afternoon, Willa was watching from the store window. Her heart leaped when she saw him, tall and solid on his horse, and she had to restrain herself from running out to meet him like a child. Instead, she waited with as much composure as she could muster while he dismounted and tied his horse to the rail outside the store. He entered with his hat in his hands, snowflakes melting in his dark hair, and when his eyes found hers across the store, his whole face lit up. "Hello, Willa." "Hello, Sam," she said, and she could not keep the smile from her face. Her father emerged from the back room, and Willa made introductions. The two men shook hands, and Willa watched anxiously as her father sized Sam up with the careful scrutiny of a man protecting his only child. But whatever he saw must have satisfied him, because he nodded and said, "Welcome to Pinion, Mr. Ashford. My daughter tells me you helped her through that storm. I am in your debt." "No debt, sir," Sam said. "Anyone would have done the same, and please call me Sam." "James," Willa's father replied. "James Whitmore. Will you be staying in town for a few days?" "If it is acceptable, yes," Sam said. "I have some business to attend to, and I was hoping to spend some time getting to know Pinion, and getting to know Willa better, with your permission." "You have it," James said. "Willa is her own woman and makes her own decisions, but you have my blessing to court her properly if that is your intention." "It is," Sam said, looking directly at Willa as he spoke. "Very much so." Over the next 3 days, Sam became a fixture in Pinion. He took Willa to dinner at the town's small restaurant, walked with her through the streets, attended church with her and her father on Sunday. He was unfailingly polite and respectful, but there was an undercurrent of something deeper between them, a connection that grew stronger with each passing hour. On his last evening in town, Sam asked Willa to take a walk with him despite the cold. They bundled up and strolled through Pinion's quiet streets, their breath fogging in the winter air. They walked to the edge of town where the buildings gave way to open land, and there Sam stopped and turned to face her. "Willa, I need to tell you something, and I apologize if I am being too direct or too forward, but I am not a man who knows how to play games or hide what he is feeling." Willa's heart was pounding. "I would not want you to hide anything." "I am falling in love with you," Sam said, the words coming out in a rush. "I know that might sound crazy. I know we have only known each other a few weeks, and most of that time has been spent apart writing letters. But I have never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. You are smart and brave and beautiful, and when I am with you, everything feels right in a way it never has before. I do not expect you to say the same thing back to me right now. I just needed you to know how I feel." Willa stared at him, at this good man standing in the cold December night telling her things she had hardly dared to hope for. And she realized that what she felt was not fear or hesitation, but absolute certainty. "I am falling in love with you too," she said, and watched his eyes go wide with surprise and joy. "I have been trying not to, telling myself it is too fast, too improbable. But my heart does not seem to care about logic or propriety. It knows what it wants, and what it wants is you." Sam closed the distance between them and cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle despite the calluses earned from years of ranch work. "Can I kiss you, Willa Whitmore?" "Yes," she whispered, and then his lips were on hers, warm and soft and perfect. They stood there in the cold, kissing under a sky full of stars, and Willa felt like her whole life had been leading to this moment. Everything made sense now. The storm, the line shack, the terror and the cold and the desperate search for shelter. It had all been necessary to bring her to Sam, to this man who had kept the fire burning and had somehow, in the process, lit a fire in her heart. When they finally pulled apart, Sam was grinning. "I do not want to leave tomorrow. I want to stay here with you." "I do not want you to leave either," Willa said. "But you have a ranch to run and I have responsibilities here. We will make this work, Sam. We will find a way." And they did find a way. Over the winter months of early 1884, Sam visited Pinyon as often as work allowed, usually managing a trip every 2 or 3 weeks. Willa continued her supply runs, but found herself planning routes that took her closer to the Ashford ranch, sometimes stopping there for a night on her way to, or from the mining camps. She met Sam's brother Michael, who was married with 2 young children, and Sam's mother Margaret, a formidable woman who reminded Willa strongly of her own mother in the best possible ways. The family welcomed Willa with open arms, and Margaret told her in private that she had never seen Sam so happy, so fully alive as he was when Willa was near. The 2 women bonded over shared experiences of life in the New Mexico high country, and Willa found herself growing to love the Ashford Ranch and the people who called it home. In March, as winter finally began to loosen its grip and the first hints of spring appeared in the high country, Sam came to Pinyon with a specific purpose. He arrived on a Saturday afternoon, and instead of coming to the store, he went directly to speak with Willa's father. The 2 men were closeted in James Whitmore's office for nearly an hour while Willa paced anxiously in the store, unable to focus on anything. When they finally emerged, both were smiling. James looked at his daughter and said, "Sam has something he would like to ask you." "Why do not you 2 take a walk?" Willa's hands were shaking as she retrieved her coat. They walked in silence to the same spot on the edge of town where Sam had first kissed her, and there he took both her hands in his. "Willa, I have asked your father for permission to marry you, and he has given his blessing. Now I am asking you. I know this has all happened quickly, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you. I want to build a life with you, want to wake up next to you every morning and go to sleep beside you every night. I want to face whatever challenges come our way together. Will you marry me?" Willa did not hesitate. "Yes. Yes, Sam, I will marry you." He pulled a ring from his pocket, a simple gold band with a small diamond. "It was my grandmother's. My mother gave it to me to give to you if you said yes." The ring fit perfectly, and Willa stared at it on her finger, barely able to believe this was real. "When?" she asked. "When should we marry?" "As soon as possible," Sam said. "Unless you want a big wedding with months of planning, but if it were up to me, I would marry you tomorrow." "I do not need a big wedding," Willa said. "I need you. Let us make it soon. June, perhaps. That gives us time to make arrangements, but is not so long that I will go mad with waiting." They settled on the first Saturday in June, and the intervening weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. Willa and her father worked to hire someone to help run the general store in her absence, someone capable and trustworthy who could take over many of Willa's responsibilities. They found a young man named Thomas who had worked in mercantile in Santa Fe and was looking to settle in a smaller town. He proved to be quick to learn and reliable, which eased Willa's concerns about leaving her father to manage alone. There was also the matter of where Willa and Sam would live after the wedding. The Ashford ranch house was large enough to accommodate them, but both Willa and Sam wanted their own space, their own home. Sam solved the problem by proposing that they build a house on the ranch property, close enough to the main house for family connections but far enough for privacy. His brother Michael enthusiastically supported the idea, and work began immediately on a modest but well-constructed cabin that would serve as their home. Willa made several trips to the ranch that spring, helping to plan the house, choosing where it would sit on the land, discussing details with Sam and the carpenter Michael had hired. She fell in love with the location Sam had chosen, a gentle rise with views of the mountains to the north and a creek running nearby. It was beautiful and peaceful, and she could already imagine their life there. The wedding itself was a simple affair held in the small church in Pinyon. Both families attended, along with many of the townspeople who had known Willa since childhood. She wore a dress of pale blue that had been her mother's, altered to fit her. Sam wore a new suit that he was clearly uncomfortable in, tugging at the collar until Willa reached up and stilled his hands, smiling at his nervousness. The ceremony was brief and heartfelt. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife and told Sam he could kiss his bride, Sam did so with a tenderness that brought tears to many eyes, including Willa's own. They were married. She was Willa Ashford now, bound to this man she had met in a blizzard, this man who had kept the fire burning and had brought light into her life. The celebration afterward was lively, with food and music and dancing. Willa danced with her father, with Sam's brother, and finally with Sam himself, who admitted he was not much of a dancer but did his best. They swayed together while people clapped and cheered, and Willa thought she had never been happier. As evening fell, they said their goodbyes and rode together to the Ashford ranch. Their house was not quite finished, but it was livable, the essential rooms completed and furnished. Sam carried Willa over the threshold, both of them laughing, and set her down gently in what would be their home. That night, lying in Sam's arms in the bed they would share for the rest of their lives, Willa thought back to that desperate ride through the blizzard, the terror of knowing she might die if she did not find shelter. She had found shelter, yes, but she had found so much more. She had found the other half of her soul. Life on the ranch proved to be both challenging and deeply satisfying. Willa had grown up in a town, and adjusting to the isolation and hard work of ranch life required adaptation. But she was strong and capable, and she threw herself into learning everything she needed to know. She learned to help with the cattle, to ride the range with Sam, to manage the complex logistics of running a ranching operation. She learned to love the vastness of the high country, the way the light changed across the mountains, the profound silence that could be found in the wild places. She also continued, with Sam's full support, to make supply runs to the mining camps. She could not give up the work that had become so important to her, and Sam never asked her to. Instead, he helped her plan routes, sometimes rode with her when his ranch work allowed, and always made sure she had good horses and proper equipment. The miners and camp workers came to know them both, and more than once Sam was thanked by men who credited Willa's supply runs with saving their lives or the lives of their friends. That first year of marriage was one of adjustment and discovery. They learned each other's habits and moods, learned how to fight and make up, learned the rhythms of living together. There were hard times, certainly. A dry spell that summer threatened the grazing land. Several head of cattle were lost to predators. Sam's mother fell ill in the fall, though she recovered. But through it all, Willa and Sam remained solid, their love deepening with each challenge overcome. In the spring of 1885, Willa discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with a complex mix of joy and terror. She wanted children, had always imagined having a family, but the reality of it was daunting. Sam was over the moon with happiness, already planning and fretting like an expectant father. His excitement was infectious, and Willa found her anxiety giving way to anticipation. The pregnancy was relatively easy, though the summer heat was oppressive, and Willa grew enormous in a way that made her feel ungainly and awkward. Sam assured her constantly that she was beautiful, and his attention and care during those months only deepened her love for him. He was patient with her mood swings, solicitous of her comfort, and endlessly optimistic about the future. Their son was born in late November, during the first snowstorm of the season. It was fitting, Willa thought through the haze of labor, that her child would be born in weather that echoed the blizzard that had brought his parents together. The birth was long and difficult, attended by a midwife from Pinyon and Sam's mother, with Sam pacing anxiously outside the bedroom door. But finally, after hours of struggle, a baby's cry filled the house, and Willa held her son for the first time. They named him Joseph, after Sam's father. He was healthy and perfect, with dark hair like his father and eyes that would eventually settle into a color somewhere between Willa's hazel and Sam's gray. Sam held his son with a look of such wonder and love that Willa felt her heart might burst. The first years of Joseph's life were busy and chaotic in the best possible ways. The ranch demanded constant attention, and caring for a baby added layers of complexity to every day. But Willa had never been happier. She loved watching Sam with their son, loved the way he was with the boy, patient and playful and tender. She loved their small family and the life they were building together. When Joseph was 2, Willa discovered she was pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was harder, complicated by exhaustion from chasing a toddler and by morning sickness that lasted well into the second trimester. But in the summer of 1888, they welcomed a daughter, whom they named Clara after Sam's grandmother. She was tiny and fierce from the start, with lungs that could wake the entire household, and a will that suggested she would be a force to be reckoned with. 2 children made life even more hectic, but also even more full. Willa had cut back on her supply runs after Joseph's birth, making only occasional trips to the nearest camps and leaving the longer, more difficult routes to younger men who had taken up the work. She did not regret the change. Her priorities had shifted, and while she still cared deeply about getting supplies to people who needed them, her family came first now. The children grew, and the ranch prospered. Sam and Michael expanded their operation, buying additional grazing land and increasing their herd. The work was hard but rewarding, and the Ashford Ranch became known throughout the territory for the quality of its cattle and the integrity of the men who ran it. Willa managed the ranch's accounts and correspondence, her head for business proving invaluable. She also became known in the area as someone who could be counted on in emergencies. Her old supply running skills translating into a reputation as a person who stayed calm in crisis and got things done. In 1892, when Joseph was 7 and Clara was 4, Willa and Sam took their children on a trip to the line shack where they had met. The structure was still there, still maintained as a shelter for cowboys working the high country. It was summer, and the area that had been buried under deadly snow was now green and lush, wildflowers carpeting the meadows. They spent the night there, all 4 of them, and Willa told the children the story of how she and their father had met. Joseph and Clara listened with wide eyes as she described the blizzard, the desperate search for shelter, and the cowboy who had arrived when she most needed help. Sam added his own details, talking about finding a beautiful woman already occupying the cabin he had been trying to reach, and how even in that first moment he had felt something shift in his chest. "So the storm brought you together?" Joseph asked, trying to understand. "It did," Willa confirmed. "Sometimes the worst things lead to the best things. I was terrified during that storm, thought I might die out there. But if it had not happened, I might never have met your father. We might have passed each other 100 times and never really seen each other. The blizzard forced us together, and in that small cabin, we learned who we really were." "And Papa kept the fire burning," Clara said, having latched onto that detail. "He did," Willa said, smiling at Sam. "He kept the fire burning, and he kept me safe, and he showed me what kind of man he was. And I fell in love with him." "I fell in love with you too," Sam said, pulling Willa close. "Best thing that ever happened to me, that blizzard." That night, lying in the narrow bunk with Sam while the children slept on bedrolls on the floor, Willa thought about the journey that had brought them here. 9 years since that desperate ride through the storm. 9 years of marriage, of building a life together, of facing challenges and celebrating victories. 9 years of love that had only grown deeper and stronger with time. "Thank you," she whispered to Sam in the darkness. "For what?" he whispered back. "For finding me. For keeping the fire burning. For being exactly who you are." Sam kissed her forehead. "Thank you for being brave enough to ride into that storm, for being strong enough to survive it, for giving me a life I never even knew I wanted until I met you." They lay there in the quiet, listening to their children breathe, and Willa felt profound gratitude for the strange and winding path that had led her to this moment. She had set out to deliver medical supplies and had found something infinitely more valuable. She had found love, true and lasting, in the most unlikely of places. The years continued to unfold with their mix of joy and hardship, triumph and setback. The children grew and thrived. Joseph became skilled with horses, showing a natural talent for gentling even the most difficult animals. Clara proved to be brilliant with numbers and began helping her mother with the ranch accounts before she was even 10 years old. Both children grew up strong and capable, learning the value of hard work and the importance of family. In 1895, Willa's father passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 68. His death was a profound loss, but Willa took comfort in knowing he had lived to see her happy and settled, had known his grandchildren and delighted in them. They buried him in Pinyon, and Willa inherited the general store, which she and Sam decided to keep running with Thomas continuing as manager. It provided a steady additional income and kept Willa connected to the town where she had grown up. Sam's mother Margaret lived another 5 years, remaining sharp and active until almost the very end. She passed in 1900, and her death hit Sam hard, though he took solace in knowing she had lived a full life and had been surrounded by family who loved her. The ranch continued to be a family enterprise, with Sam and Michael working in partnership, and the next generation beginning to contribute as well. The new century brought changes. The wild frontier that Willa and Sam had known in their youth was becoming more settled and civilized. Towns grew, railroads expanded, and the rough edges of Western life were gradually smoothed away. But in the high country where the Ashford Ranch sprawled across thousands of acres, some things remained unchanged. The work was still hard, the land still demanded respect, and the bonds of family still held strong. Joseph married in 1905, bringing home a sweet-tempered young woman named Emily who fit seamlessly into ranch life. Clara, more independent and ambitious than her brother, went to school in Santa Fe and became a teacher, though she returned to the ranch every summer and eventually married a lawyer who was wise enough to understand that his wife would never be content as merely a city wife. They split their time between Santa Fe and the ranch, and their children grew up knowing both worlds. Willa and Sam became grandparents multiple times over, and they reveled in the role. They were the kind of grandparents who always had time for a story or a ride, who snuck extra cookies and indulged requests for one more game or one more song. They watched their grandchildren run through the same meadows where their own children had played, and they saw the continuation of the life they had built together. In the summer of 1910, Sam organized a surprise for Willa's 49th birthday. He had the whole family gather at the old line shack, which he had secretly renovated and improved. It was still small and simple, but it was now weather-tight and comfortable, a place where family members could stay when working the high country or when they just wanted to escape for a while. They had a party there, 3 generations of the family coming together in the place where it had all begun. There was food and laughter, music and dancing in the meadow outside the cabin. As the sun set and the sky filled with stars, Sam took Willa's hand and led her away from the crowd, up to a small rise where they could see the whole scene below them. 26 years, Sam said. 26 years since I stumbled into that cabin and found you there. 26 years since you kept the fire burning, Willa said, leaning into him. I have been keeping it burning ever since, Sam said. For you, for our family, for the life we built. I would do it all again, Willa. Every moment, every challenge, every joy, I would choose you every single time. Willa looked up at her husband, at the man who had aged alongside her, whose hair was now more gray than dark, whose face was lined from years of sun and wind but was still the most handsome face she knew. I would choose you too. Always and forever, Sam Ashford. You are my home. They kissed as the stars came out above them, and below, their family celebrated in the light of the fire that Sam had built. It was a perfect moment, a culmination of all the years and all the love, and Willa felt complete. The years after that were gentle ones. Sam and Joseph took over more of the ranch's day-to-day operations, allowing Sam and Willa to step back and enjoy the fruits of their decades of labor. They traveled some, visiting Clara in Santa Fe, taking a trip to Denver to see the new sights of the 20th century, but they always returned home to the ranch, to the mountains and the wide skies and the land they loved. Sam's health began to decline in his late 60s, his joints stiff from years of hard physical labor, his heart showing signs of strain. But he remained cheerful and engaged, spending his days with Willa, their grandchildren, and the land he had worked his entire life. They took long walks together when he was up to it, talking about everything and nothing, comfortable in the deep companionship that came from nearly 4 decades of marriage. On a crisp autumn afternoon in 1918, Sam and Willa sat together on the porch of the house he had built for her so many years ago. The mountains to the north were dusted with the first snow of the season, and the air had that particular clarity that comes only in the high country fall. "Looks like an early winter," Sam observed. "That snow is coming down lower than usual for October." "Reminds me of the blizzard," Willa said. "The one that brought us together." Sam smiled. "I think about that storm often, how lost I was until I found you. How cold I was until you warmed my heart." "I was the cold one," Willa protested. "You kept the fire burning, remember? We kept each other warm," Sam said. "That is what marriage is, I think. Building a fire together and keeping it burning through all the seasons, all the years." "We did well, did we not, Willa? We built a good fire." "We did," Willa agreed, her throat tight with emotion. "The best fire. It has burned bright for 35 years. Sam reached for her hand, his grip still strong despite his age. "I love you, Willa Ashford. I have loved you from that first moment in the line shack, and I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "I love you too," Willa whispered. "More than words can say." They sat there as the sun set, hands clasped, watching the light fade from the sky and the stars emerge one by one. It was peaceful and perfect, and when Sam's breathing grew shallow and his hand grew slack in hers, Willa held on tight and told him it was all right, that she loved him, that he had been the best part of her life. Sam passed quietly, surrounded by love, in the house he had built, on the land he had tended, with the woman he adored holding his hand. And though Willa's heart shattered with his loss, she also knew profound gratitude. They had been given 35 years together, years filled with love and family and purpose. Not everyone was so lucky. The family gathered for Sam's funeral, and he was buried on the ranch beside his parents in sight of the mountains he had loved. Willa stood at the graveside, flanked by her children and grandchildren, and she told the story one more time of the blizzard that had brought them together, of the fire that Sam had kept burning, of the love that had sustained them through all the years. Willa lived another decade after Sam's death, staying active and involved in the ranch and the family. She became the matriarch, the keeper of stories, the one who could remember how things used to be and who made sure the younger generations understood where they came from. She spent time at the line shack often, feeling closest to Sam there, in the place where their story had begun. She watched her grandchildren grow up and marry, welcomed great-grandchildren into the family, and saw the ranch continue to thrive under Joseph's stewardship. She remained sharp and engaged until the very end, her mind full of memories and her heart full of love. On a winter morning in 1928, Willa passed away peacefully in her sleep, 45 years to the day after the blizzard that had changed her life. Her family found her with a smile on her face, and clutched in her hand was a small, worn piece of paper. It was Sam's first letter to her, the one where he had told her he could not stop thinking about her, the one that had started them on the path to forever. They buried her beside Sam, and the whole county came out for the funeral, people whose lives had been touched by this remarkable woman who had braved blizzards to bring supplies to mining camps, who had built a life of purpose and love, who had shown generations what it meant to be strong and kind and true. The ranch continued, passed down through the generations, and the story of Willa and Sam became family legend, told and retold at gatherings and celebrations. The line shack remained standing, maintained by each successive generation as a memorial to where it all began. And on the porch of the house, Sam had built, grandchildren and great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren gathered to watch the sun set over the mountains, and to hear about the blizzard that had trapped her alone, the cowboy who had found her, and the fire he had kept burning that warmed not just one night but an entire lifetime. Their love story became woven into the fabric of the land itself, a reminder that sometimes the worst storms bring the greatest blessings, that sometimes getting lost, is the only way to find what you were always meant to discover, and that a fire built with love and tended with care can burn forever, warming not just two hearts but generations of hearts yet to come. The legacy of Willa and Sam Ashford lived on, in the children they raised, in the land they stewarded, in the values they embodied, and in the enduring truth that love found in the most unlikely circumstances can prove to be the strongest love of all.